Hello, this is Impact, bringing you all the day's top stories. I'm Geeta Gurumuthy. Intense fighting between Turkey-backed fighters and Kurds. President Trump imposes sanctions on Ankara. We'll have the latest from the Turkey-Syria border as and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan on the first full day of their official visit. That's all coming up on Impact. Your views at Geeta Gurumuthy. The French Prime Minister has said it is inevitable that decisions by Turkey and the United States in Syria will lead to a resurgence of the Islamic State group. President Trump has approved sanctions against Turkey over its military offensive against the Kurds in northern Syria. That's despite the withdrawal of US forces in the region being seen as a green light by Ankara for its incursion. Turkey, which regards the Kurdish fighters as terrorists, wants to occupy a buffer zone reaching 30 kilometres into Syria. In a deal brokered by Russia, the Kurds are now receiving help from the Syrian government. Well, the sanctions announced by the United States freeze Turkish assets and halt negotiations on a trade deal. The US Vice President Mike Pence is heading to the region.
President Trump made it very clear that the United States is going to continue to take actions against Turkey's economy until they bring the violence to an end. We want an immediate ceasefire, and we want to begin negotiations between Turkey and Syrian defense forces. And President Trump again offered to have the United States of America mediate in those discussions.
The Turkish shelling, so that seems to be their response to the American sanction. President Erdogan, for his part, says he is not going to back down, that this offensive will continue until Turkey achieves what he called the ultimate victory. We are hearing, of course, that the Vice President is heading to Turkey. That will step up the pressure on Turkey to call off this offensive. But for now, as far as Turkey is concerned, this offensive will continue.
And what about the American position? Does it look like there's been a change of heart from the White House? Because there's been very differing signals, hasn't there?
Well, it's been an extraordinary week when you think about it. It was only just over a week ago that Donald Trump, in effect, greenlit this operation because he said that American forces were no longer going to be embedded with Kurdish units. And we've had talk throughout the offensive that there's limits on the Turkish operation, with talk that America will impose sanctions. It now appears to have pulled the trigger. The pressure is building. It isn't clear whether or not Turkey has met its objectives yet in this operation, and whether or not it will actually listen to the American position. But I think if those sanctions do start biting, and they've targeted several ministries, Turkey might reassess its options, but it's very difficult to know exactly what will happen until President Erdogan sits down with the American Vice President.
And Martin, Reuters are reporting that the US-led coalition is saying that they're out of Manbij town in northern Syria at the moment. What about the position of Russia in all this?
Well, let's just take Manbij, because that's actually a key town. It's a potential flashpoint, because that brings Russia into it. The situation you have on the ground is you now have Syrian government forces backed by Russia and Iran inside Manbij, with reports of pro-Turkish forces around that town. And the potential there for a confrontation between all these powers is real, and that's what everybody's worried about. As for Russia, Russia is being seen as the mediator in all of this. It's extraordinary when you think about it. America, and I think if people want to reach some kind of agreement in Syria, they know they will have to go through one country. And that country is not America, it's Russia. It gives you an illustration of how things have changed in the Middle East in the past week.
Martin, patience there for us on the Turkey-Syria border. Let's give you some breaking news now on another big story. And in the last hour, the president of the Bulgarian Football Union has resigned after racist abuse at an England match. The country's prime minister had demanded that Borislav Mihailov stand down after England players were racially abused during a match in Sofia. The president of the governing body of football in Europe, UEFA, has urged the football family to wage war on the racists following the abuse. UEFA has a 3-stage protocol to deal with incidents like this, and it was put into action on Monday. Our sports correspondent Joe Wilson reports from Sofia.
You could say this game began with Marcus Rashford's blistering finish to score the first England goal. In fact, it began before that. It began when England's players first heard the monkey chants, the racial abuse.
I mean, I heard it before I even got to the other side of the pitch in the warm-up. So we spoke about it coming off the pitch after the warm-up. And then obviously it was happening in the game. But like I said, it's difficult to kind of categorise the whole country. I think it's perhaps a minority, and second half was a lot better. So perhaps a victory all round.
There were intense discussions between England players, management and officials through the first half, and an announcement was made to the crowd that the referee might suspend the game if the abuse continued. It was greeted by boos. There were Nazi salutes in the ground.
When England's players left this pitch at half-time, they then actually discussed whether they should even carry on with the match. They decided to play on, and England's captain told me he believes that was the right decision.
Everyone wanted to carry on and do their talking on the pitch, which I'm extremely proud of. It's not easy to play in circumstances like that, but the 6-0 victory and the way we played, the manner in which we played, I'm extremely proud of, for sure.
One answer to the abuse was the scoreline. Manager Gareth Southgate has openly acknowledged that English football has its own issues to deal with, but racism was displayed in its starkest, most blatant form here in Bulgaria. England's players exposed it, but the reaction can't stop here. Joe Wilson, BBC News in Sofia.
Well, just to let you know, Reuters is reporting that police special forces have been raiding the Bulgarian Football Union's headquarters in Sofia. So that investigation obviously sounds pretty serious, but we will confirm more on that as soon as we can. Just Reuters saying that the Bulgarian Football Union's headquarters in Sofia have been raided by police special forces in Bulgaria, and that comes after the head of the football there did stand down. That was called for, of course, by the Prime Minister in Bulgaria. Let's update you now on Brexit. We gather that there might be a press conference in the next hour or so from Leo Varadkar, the Taoiseach in Dublin. But the European Union's chief Brexit negotiator has given the UK a deadline of midnight tonight to put forward a legal text on a deal. That is if an agreement is to be reached at a key summit this week. Michel Barnier told a meeting of Europe ministers of the 27 other states that the other scenarios were an extension to Britain's departure date or a breakdown. Well, the British government says it is aware of time constraints and it wants to make progress as quickly as possible. Our Europe correspondent Adam Fleming reports now from Luxembourg.
Morning.
What felt like all of Europe was waiting to hear if the Brexit talks were making progress.
Even if the agreement will be difficult, more and more difficult, to be frank, it's still possible this week.
Looking tired after negotiations went into the night, Michel Barnier chose every word carefully.
Reaching an agreement is still possible. Obviously, any agreement must work for everyone.
Inside, he laid out the timeline for ministers from the 27 other countries. If there's to be a deal for EU leaders to approve at their summit starting on Thursday, that deal would have to be agreed by tonight, Tuesday. But in Brexit, deadlines exist to be missed.
It is, of course, possible to move beyond the summit and to continue talks next week. That is feasible because the UK isn't due to leave the European Union until the end of the month. But from everybody's perspective, if we could provide clarity at this leaders' summit, then I think that would be a welcome development.
We have a high level of solidarity with Ireland from the beginning, and we try to protect the integrity of the internal market, the single market. So if it's possible to stick in such a kind of red line, it's possible to have a deal. And then we will see if it's also possible for the British Parliament to agree on that.
Will there be a deal tonight?
In London, the Prime Minister welcomes an observer of this process, the NATO Secretary-General. If Boris Johnson seals a deal with his other European colleagues, it'll have to be approved by Parliament. And not just that, it'll have to be turned into British law too, which means more votes.
And Parliament, once it's agreed something, can legislate very quickly. So if the meaningful vote goes through, then the legislation will merely be the ratification in domestic law of the treaty. And that, I think, is a relatively easy bill to pass if there is a deal.
What matters now is whether the UK's negotiating team can work their magic in Brussels. There are still big differences on customs checks on the island of Ireland and the shape of any future trade agreement. Gaps that have to be bridged in just a matter of hours, or there won't be a deal this week. Adam Fleming, BBC News, Luxembourg.
6 people have died and at least 40 have been injured when a hailstorm caused a roof to collapse during a party in Peru. Local media reported that over 1,000 people were standing under the roof celebrating a local festival when the accident happened. 5 of the injured are in a serious condition. Thousands of residents in the Ecuadorian capital, Quito, have been cleaning up the city centre after almost 2 weeks of anti-austerity protests. Many people cleared parks and streets of burning tyres and rubble. Indigenous leaders struck a deal with President Moreno to cancel the disputed austerity package on Sunday. Protesters are now leaving the city. At least 7 people died in the demonstrations. A new international study suggests that a cheap and widely available drug could save hundreds of thousands of people from traumatic brain injuries. The research suggests that tranexamic acid, or TXA, can significantly improve some patients' chances of survival. The BBC's global health correspondent Tulip Mazumdar reports.
In a brief moment, a head injury can change a person's life forever. 5 years ago, Pam Foley fell off her bike in Oxford.
All I remember is 1 minute on my bike, next minute on the ground, trying to get up. I knew I was stunned, but I didn't realise how much I had hurt myself.
Pam had fractured her skull and suffered a bleed on her brain. She did make a good recovery, but lost her sense of smell and taste.
It's a constant reminder of the pleasures that can be had from simple smells. I really miss the smell of freshly cut grass. I love that smell.
This is a CT scan of a patient's brain. This is unfortunately a young man who's punched and fell to the ground.
There are currently very few treatment options for patients who suffer these types of injuries, particularly in low and middle income countries. Patients can need surgery to ease pressure on the brain or life support equipment. Researchers, though, say now there's another option, a simple injection of tranexamic acid.
When patients are bleeding into their brain, naturally two processes occur simultaneously. The process of clotting and of breaking down the clot. Tranexamic acid stops the breakdown of the clot, so allows the clot to form more effectively and hence reduces and stops the bleeding.
This is tranexamic acid. It's been around for decades and was originally used for things like heavy periods. It's cheap, it costs just a few dollars per vial, and it's already easily accessible all around the world.
The Royal London Hospital here in the UK was one of 175 hospitals across 29 countries and involving more than 12,000 patients to take part in the trial.
It's used for postpartum hemorrhage because
it found deaths in patients with mild to moderate brain injuries were cut by a fifth if the drug was given within 3 hours.
It's a simple injection. It can be given around the world by doctors and nurses. There's no special training needed to give it.
Much more ahead. Who do you turn to if you're looking for love in Japan? Well, the government thinks it has the answer.
Come and listen to my story about a man named Jed. A poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude. Black gold, Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. The kinfolk said, Jed, move away from there. Said, California is the place you ought to be. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly.
Opportunity. What we deliver by delivering.
Impact on BBC World News. A reminder of our top story this hour. The French Prime Minister has said it is inevitable that decisions by Turkey and the United States in Syria will lead to a resurgence of the so-called Islamic State group. There have been more clashes today with intense fighting between Kurdish forces and Turkish-backed militias. The White House has approved sanctions against Turkey over its military offensive. We've had some pictures in from the region, and the video that we're getting in at the moment shows Turkey-backed Syrian opposition fighters fighting inside the border town of Ras Al Ain. You can see there that it is obviously incredibly difficult. Kurdish fighters until now. Well, we can speak to our Washington correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue. Gary, just first of all, a very strong statement here from the French Prime Minister saying it is inevitable that decisions by the United States is going to lead to a resurgence of Islamic State.
Well, so this is something that, in a sense, is being laid at the feet of the president because of his breakout, some sort of regrouping. These people could melt into the population again, as has happened before, and then find a way to reassemble at some point. The president has said that it's up to Turkey and stop that happening, up to Turkey, in fact, up to Europe as well to stop that happening, although Europe doesn't have any troops particularly in that area either, so it's unclear how they would do that. But that seems to be the position at the moment. Meanwhile, I think we're expecting a meeting at the Security Council tomorrow, of course, and the sanctions that America has put in place will go into operation. And they're pretty limited in scope. I mean, there's 3 individual ministers plus some sanctions on some industries like steel, for example, that putting tariffs back up. But certainly criticism here from the Democrats about the weakness of the sanctions, as they would describe it.
So what is the logic of President Trump's decision then? As you say, people saying that he's basically green-lit Turkey's move here. Why would he want to do that? And would he not be fearful himself on the IS question at the very least?
Yeah, I mean, he denies that it's green light, obviously, but that's what he's been accused of. His overriding motivation, I suspect, here is domestic and political. He ran on a promise of bringing troops home, of ending foreign wars, of stopping paying for other people's geopolitical problems. All those sorts of issues are absolutely bread and butter to President Trump, and were during the campaign, and are often bread and butter to many Republican candidates. This is something that's a perennial in American politics, about not being involved, not being abroad spending all that money, not putting our boys and girls in harm's way, all that kind of thing. And I think this is don't forget, we're barely a year away from the general election. This is the president attempting to prove to the people who vote for him that he's making good on his promises, and it does, in some ways, help to distract a little, perhaps, from all that talk of impeachment, doesn't it?
Gary O'Donoghue, many thanks indeed there for us live in DC. Now, Britain's Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have met Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan on the first full day of their visit to the country. The former cricketer was a friend of Princess Diana's and new Prince William as a child. This report from Sukunda Kamani does contain some flash photography.
The royal trip kicked off with a visit to a school in Islamabad. Education, along with climate change, are understood to be the issues the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge want to focus on in particular whilst in Pakistan. They also met the country's Prime Minister, cricketer turned politician Imran Khan. For both countries, this is a key international relationship.
Feud with Daryl Morey, but I believe he wasn't educated on the situation at hand, and he spoke, and so many people could have been harmed. Not only financially, but physically, emotionally, spiritually. So just be careful what we say and what we do, even though, yes, we do have freedom of speech, but there can.
Getting married now. So that is why this government initiative is welcome, presumably?
So the government initiative, of course, yes, definitely is welcome. But I think the impetus behind the government initiative is the fact that so many people have already left the rural areas. And so rural governments think, well, maybe we can, lure back those singles in the cities to a rural area if we can find them a mate.
So how does it actually work? What happens if you sign up?
So you can sign up, you can give them your information. and then you can have access to a pool of potential singles and you can meet up with them.
So I think we're looking at some promotional video material here. Why do people need help with this though? I mean,
we do see a disparity where there are more women compared to the men because a lot of the men move to the bigger cities for the economic opportunities, and then you have women who are left behind.
Fascinating. We'll see whether that is successful or not, I guess. I'm on Twitter at Geeta Gurumurthy. Thanks for watching. See you very soon. Bye.
Hello there. Sharp, thundery downpours across France on Monday are now moving their way through Italy and could cause some issues. It's this massive cloud here. At the same time, another weather front is waiting to push into the UK, and that will move its way across Europe through Wednesday and Thursday. So you can see that heavy rain moving out of Germany through Italy into the Czech Republic. Then that's going to be replaced by this next batch of wet and windy weather across France as well. Through the southeastern Mediterranean, it's fine and settled here. It's still very pleasant with temperatures into the high 20s, maybe low 30s. A better day on Wednesday for Italy, for the south of France and for southern Spain, but for Portugal, northern Spain along with France, we're starting to see that wet and windy weather arriving, and that will push its way steadily south and east through Wednesday night into Thursday. A bit colder across parts of Scandinavia, particularly the far north of Norway. So this is the story on Thursday. That front eases through, and then we'll have some showers then developing into the far north behind it, and a bit of a north-west-south-east split with the best of the weather certainly through the Mediterranean. But it is a quieter story as we move into the weekend for London and for Paris. Madrid and Rome stay fine and dry, but the best of the sunshine perhaps into Italy. Further east, it looks as though Athens will have the lion's share of the sunshine and also the warmth to go with it too.
A lot of people who are living in the past think that the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition is a show where people have paintings of cats and dogs. The Summer Exhibition is one of the most serious contemporary art exhibitions in the world.
I'm embarking on an epic adventure to understand how thousands of years of culture